A man stumbles backward into the dust. His hand shakes before he even reaches for the gun. A shout tears through the narrow street. Horses rear. A window slams shut. Smoke hangs low, thick and bitter. Boots scrape against wooden boards. Someone falls hard. Another man freezes, eyes wide, unsure whether to run or fire. The town holds its breath, suspended between silence and violence.
In seconds, lives are decided. But when the echoes fade and the bodies are carried away, what remains in a place built on tension and pride?
This was Tombstone in the 1880s. Not yet a legend carved into film and myth, but a living town on the edge of ambition and collapse. The gunfight near the OK Corral would become famous, a symbol of frontier justice. Yet that brief eruption of violence was only a fragment of a much larger story. Tombstone was a silver boom town, swelling with wealth, rivalry, and fragile order. The duel did not create the town's instability, it exposed it. Behind the spectacle of gunfire lay years of pressure, resentment, and dreams that had grown too large for the streets that tried to contain them.
It is tempting to imagine Tombstone as a place already doomed, a lawless settlement waiting for its inevitable bloodshed. But before the gunfight, there was momentum. Silver had been discovered in the surrounding hills. Investors poured money into mines. Newspapers praised opportunity. Saloons filled with music and laughter. Hotels opened their doors to travelers from the east.
For a moment, Tombstone felt like the future of the American West. Prosperous, modern, confident. That very optimism sharpened the coming conflict. The higher the expectations rose, the harder the fall would be. The town functioned like a living engine. Miners worked deep underground, hauling silver from narrow shafts lit by lanterns. Merchants supplied tools, clothing, whiskey, and food at inflated prices. Stagecoaches arrived loaded with mail, gossip, and ambition. Lawmen tried to impose structure on a population that shifted daily. Cowboys drove cattle through dusty streets. Gambling tables stayed open until dawn. Information traveled quickly through newspapers and rumor alike. Every business depended on the mines. Every reputation depended on strength. The same network that created prosperity also created friction. Too many men with weapons, too many grudges, too much pride. The origins of the conflict did not begin with a single insult or a single shot. They began far from the wooden storefronts of Allen Street. Deep in the Arizona territory, silver veins cut through stone, invisible for centuries. Geological forces had shaped them long before any human laid claim. When prospectors uncovered the deposits in the late 1870s, they triggered a migration. Wealth drew men across deserts and mountains. The metal beneath the earth seemed harmless, merely a resource. But like gold in California, silver carried more than value. It carried pressure. The point of contact between ambition and civilization formed at the heart of Tombstone itself. The town became a gateway, a meeting point for miners, ranchers, lawmen, and opportunists. Every saloon was a stage, every street corner a potential battlefield. The OK Corral was not an isolated location, but part of a dense web of alliances and rivalries. When law enforcement confronted the Clanton and McClaury families in October 1881,
It was not simply about disarming men. It was about control, over territory, over trade routes, over reputation. The duel lasted seconds. Its consequences stretched for years. After the gunfight, tension did not vanish. It multiplied. Friends chose sides. Newspapers fueled outrage. Retaliation simmered in the shadows. Violence spread beyond the corral. Assassination attempts, ambushes, and whispered threats reshaped daily life. Streets once filled with business now carried unease. Citizens locked doors earlier. Trust eroded.
The speed of escalation surprised even those who believed themselves hardened to frontier danger. Order seemed always one step away from unraveling.
In the face of uncertainty, people searched for explanations. Some believed strong lawmen were the only answer, that harsher enforcement would restore peace. Others insisted government interference threatened freedom. Superstition mixed with politics. Rumors exaggerated every incident. Vigilante impulses grew stronger. Justice blurred into vengeance.
The attempt to secure stability often deepened division. Each act of enforcement risked provoking another act of retaliation.
Social bonds frayed, business partnerships dissolved, families debated whether to leave town. Letters home described both opportunity and fear. In boarding houses and parlors, conversations grew tense. The myth of the heroic gunman masked the reality of sleepless nights and constant suspicion. Institutions struggled to maintain authority in a place where loyalty shifted quickly.
Even those not involved in violence felt its weight. Every argument carried the possibility of escalation.
Desperation sharpened identities. Cowboys and lawmen became symbols rather than individuals. Outsiders were treated with suspicion. Immigrants and marginalized groups often bore the blame for rising crime and instability. Prejudice found fertile ground in uncertainty. Accusations spread easily in a town already divided. The search for culprits simplified complex tensions into easy targets.
In protecting their own interests, many justified exclusion and hostility. The human cost was not only in gunshot wounds, but in communities fractured by distrust. Beyond Tombstone's main streets, the impact rippled outward. Ranches struggled when violence disrupted cattle drives. Mining operations faltered during periods of instability. Supply lines grew uncertain. Small settlements that depended on Tombstone's prosperity felt the strain. The desert surrounding the town remained indifferent, its silence contrasting sharply with the turmoil inside. Dust storms rolled across abandoned claims. Hills scarred by mining waited without judgment. Over time, the intensity began to fade. Not because harmony triumphed, but because exhaustion set in. Court trials replaced gunfights. Economic fluctuations weakened the silver boom. Investors grew cautious. Some residents left in search of safer opportunities. The frenzy that once defined Tombstone softened into routine. The legend of the duel grew larger than the town itself.
The tragedy did not resolve cleanly. It simply settled into memory. The world that followed was different. Tombstone never fully regained its early confidence. The silver that fueled its rise declined in importance. Railroads shifted trade patterns. Other towns surpassed it.
Yet the story of its conflict became central to the narrative of the American West. The gunfight was retold as a clash between order and chaos, heroism and outlawry.
In reality, it reflected the fragile balance of a society expanding faster than its institutions could adapt. Wealth had built the town. Rivalry nearly tore it apart.
Looking back now, it is easy to romanticize the moment, to see it as a clear battle between good and evil. But the truth resists simplicity. Tombstone in the 1880s was a community of ordinary people navigating extraordinary pressure. Ambition collided with insecurity. Law struggled to keep pace with growth. Pride refused compromise.
The duel was only a spark in a landscape already dry with tension.
We still live in places shaped by similar forces: rapid growth, competing visions of order, economic booms that outpace stability. The story of Tombstone invites us to consider how quickly confidence can turn to confrontation, how easily identity becomes weaponized, how fragile civic trust can be when tested.
History does not belong only to the gunfire. It lives in the days before and after, in the quiet conversations, the uneasy alliances, the hopes that built towns, and the fears that threatened them. To look beyond the duel is to see a fuller picture of ambition and consequence.
When we return to Tombstone, we are not merely visiting a legend. We are examining the anatomy of a community under strain. The West was not just won by courage or lost to chaos. It was shaped by human choices made in moments of uncertainty.
To understand those choices is to understand something about ourselves. The past stands not as spectacle, but as reflection. And somewhere in the dust of a frontier town, the echoes of that short gunfight still ask what truly defines justice when ambition and fear collide.
And somewhere in the dust of a frontier town, the echoes of that short gunfight still ask what truly defines justice when ambition and fear collide.